I'm Chip Hanna, and this is the For You Leaders podcast featuring Kirk Dando, where we truly go beyond the veneer. You'll experience the raw and the real of leadership. You'll see your feet not miles away from the top. We get the chance to spend a lot of time in boardrooms with executive teams, offsites, and even on our podcast. But we realize we're missing something really important: women.
Chip, I think you're spot on. I've had the chance to work with a wide variety of women leaders in my career, and they're some of the best leaders that I've worked with. But unfortunately, there's just too few women in really key leadership roles. Today, we're going to talk to one of the most accomplished women leaders that I've had a chance to work with personally, and that's Mellie Price. Her bio would take several minutes for me to go through, but here are some cliff notes. She's an experienced investor, an executive, fund manager, and 8-time entrepreneur. You can see her full bio at foryouleaders.com, and I would encourage you to go look at it because it is very impressive, and I referred to it several times in the podcast today. I'd encourage you to check it out.
Now, not only is she extremely accomplished, but she provided you some amazing insight, didn't she, Kirk?
Yeah, Chip. Like any good leader, Mellie's view on leadership has matured. Even though I believe and see in her that she is a very mature leader, she still feels like she's a pup.
Well, when I think about the first times where we were called out to be a leader, certainly it goes back to childhood. But I have to tell you, at this point, I'm still adjusting to it. I in the realm of leadership, even now, I still feel like a pup. I feel like that young girl in class where the teacher asks you to do something because they are asking you to be a leader, and if the feeling for me was always, oh, you picked me? Of course. Okay, I'm on it. And I still to this day feel that way. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but every day that I'm served in some sort of way, I'm genuinely honored to be asked. And it inspires me to want to do my best in that moment. And that's a feeling that goes as far back as I can remember.
Well, I appreciate saying that, and this is by no stretch of imagination a set-up question, but if you listen to the kind of the theme through all these podcasts and the people that I have met as leaders, what you just said is so true. The best leaders that I have ever experienced, the people that get sought out and actually make a difference, are the ones that they didn't set out to be great leaders. They just set out to be great people. And I would definitely put you in that category. And they often feel like they're still like they're neophytes when it comes to leadership. It's the ones that feel like they've cracked the code that you got to watch out for.
Yeah. Yes. I concur. To me, I am just trying to be the best person that I can be in any given moment. Some moments are better than others. But, leadership to me really means it's less the hard skills of communication that you can learn and be trained into. And it's more about the authenticity of who you are as a person. Do your actions speak louder than your words? Do you extend compassion and generosity in the face of adversity? Are you trustworthy? Are you impeccable with your word? Those are all things that are just about being a good person, doing what you say you're going to do. Is just that'll put you miles above a lot of folks out there.
Yeah.
So I literally sometimes I take an inventory, and it's easier said than done. But little things, it's like as I raise my 5-year-old daughter, I tell her every day, that it comes up. I always do what I say I'll do, and I really try to honor that. So if I tell her, if you do X, Y, and Z, then you'll get to enjoy X, Y, and Z. I really try to make good on that because I'm setting on an everyday basis. I'm setting an example for her with my actions and my words. And so, character, integrity, trustworthiness, authenticity, those are all the things I think about when I think of leadership.
Oh, Mellie, I love what you just said. I mean, it's I think sometimes we overcomplicate things. And I think that, and I love the fact that you're very intentional about pouring into your daughter, because leadership is not different at work or in a not-for-profit or in a VC fund or at home, right? I mean, it's those characteristics of of like what you just said, the simple things. Do what you say you're going to do. Your word is your bond. Those kind of things oftentimes are lost. And we think that leadership has to mean, being out front, having a big influence, which helps, obviously, having a big platform and stuff. But sometimes it's the simple things of just pouring into your 5-year-old daughter. So thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful for sure.
And, I'm just sitting here, my brain is exploding as we're talking about this. All of that rolls up to personal accountability. And if there's one thing that I just think is a key attribute, it's personal accountability. And that shows up not only in the form of doing what you say you're going to do, but also in being personally accountable to reflect back on your actions and see, is there room for improvement in that? And, being honest about that aspect too. We're human. None of us get it right the first time. Sometimes we have horrible reactions. Sometimes we provide horrible advice. Sometimes we act from our lesser self. And that is not a failure. It's, from my perspective, it's an opportunity to reflect. And that in and of itself, it builds trust. The other day with my daughter, I said I would do something and I didn't. And she said, "Mama, you promised me I could have 2 choices." I was like, "You're right. I did." And I just made a mistake, and I asked for her forgiveness, and she gave it to me, and there was no issue.
Yeah. So I want to highlight a couple things. One is, like I said, building that trust. And I was going to ask you, but I think you kind of answered it, but I want to double down on it, is when you make mistakes in personal accountability. I mean, how do you handle those things? I mean, you just gave a great example with your daughter. I mean, do you have some other areas where, you maybe made a mistake and had to circle back around, and how you handled it? Because a lot of times people just sweep those under the rug, look the other way, kind of point the fingers. Have you had something where you kind of had to swallow a bitter pill and kind of step up in personal accountability?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I would say it happens on a fairly regular basis, whether it's to my daughter, my partner, my, colleagues at work. I make mistakes all the time. Yep. And I really do try to realize it as close to when I did it as possible and just own it.
See, that's, once again, overly obvious, embarrassingly simple, right? But just own it. And I love the way you said that, is because we all make mistakes all the time. I mean, it's what we do with them, obviously. And once you get in the habit of kind of saying, "Oh, sorry," it doesn't become this thing that just kind of gets you gridlock. And I think it's really hard for leaders, because oftentimes we're looked to is to have all the answers, to be the ones that get it right the first time. I mean, we're kind of the final stop. And sometimes I think just, unintentionally, we think that when we make mistakes, or we don't know what we don't know, we just kind of turtle in a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's human nature.
Talk to me about being a leader who is a woman. What advice would you give my daughters? What advice would you give your daughters about being a woman leader?
This is always a tough question for me. And if I'm honest, I think I'm in a personal evolution around this subject. If you had asked me for the first 20 years of my career, I would have said just, be yourself and all the attributes of leadership that we talked about. Be authentic, do your best at all times, act with integrity, honor your word, be on time. These are all things that are extra important when you're a woman, because you're judged by a different measuring stick. And I've not been somebody historically who was particularly activist about women leadership and about the inequities that come with being a woman in the business world. I held the belief that women should just do what they're doing and they can compete in a man's world. And I was really unwilling to recognize that it was a man's world, which is ironic, because in many other ways in my life, I have been, fairly politically active, and I have strong opinions. So this is not coming from somebody who's sort of a rolled over, bulldozered over woman. I never experienced consciously being left behind, paid less, treated differently because I was a woman. And it wasn't until I was a mom that I realized the biases that do exist. And I've become much more engaged in the last several years around this issue. Because when I was starting companies, which I started in my in my mid 20s. And one company in particular was a seasonal event company, Front Gate Tickets, where we sell tickets for many of the largest festivals in the nation. And so when the festival comes around and it's time to sell tickets, a big team of us go on site and we handle the box office. And, during that period of time, it's an industry that sometimes has people who don't have the highest work ethic. And so I was dealing with a lot of people who called in sick and didn't show up for a variety of reasons. And what got lumped into that for me was, women who had children, and just that sort of like, really? They're sick for the third time in a row in 3 weeks. And now I'm like, oh, wow, that really does happen. And so, I, as an entrepreneur who's just trying to get things done and build, and you want dependability, and the people who work, hard, it was very easy to assume the worst of people who had very real life situations. And the practical reality is that does get in the way. And so now I'm turning into somebody who really cares passionately about advocating for things that help women stay in the office. I love some of these companies that are providing on-site daycare. I mean, we're going to pay for daycare anyway. If you're a career woman, you're going to pay for daycare or support in some way, shape, or form, whatever you want to call it. Wouldn't it be lovely to let them ride to work and get to see them at lunch and get to pop in when you have a 20-minute break? And it just is such a game changer around the ability for women to stay in the workforce. And as we see, young women come in, but then when they reach the age where we start having children, that's where the numbers really change. It's not the beginning of the funnel. It's the end of the funnel where we're lacking. And so what I would say to all these young women is figure out the support structures you need to be able to stay in the game for the duration, because, that's really where it's most fulfilling as a human being to you as a woman. And it's where it's the most empowering to you as a mom to be able to go the distance. And just realizing, I think so many women come into leadership sort of expecting that in their mid 30s or mid 40s, when their families have needs, they're going to check out. They're going to have to check out.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I felt kind of the same way you did is like, leadership is not, it doesn't have a gender bias, right? I've have personally experienced and learned and grown from so many strong, very competent, very caring and influential women that were leaders but I've also seen I've also sat in a lot of board meetings and boardrooms and executive teams and those kind of things. And there is a dynamic there. And to say that there isn't would just be not telling the truth, in my opinion, in my experience anyways. And so, I mean, that piece of advice of saying, find those support structures, find those ways. Don't just mentally check out before you even got into the game, because there are, like I said, there's personally so many strong, incredibly capable, caring and competent women leaders that if they check out when they're in their 30s and 40s so they can go and do what's a priority to them, whatever that is, there's just a gap. And I think there's a huge gap right now in leaders that really are for you, people that really do care and want to pour into you, and they care more about what they can put in. And a lot of those leaders are women. So thank you for sharing
that's
that.
True. Kirk, I do want to just say, I have to touch on the fact, I think those same challenges exist for men in different ways. As a man and a leader who has 3 daughters, I suspect you've had the experience where the expectation is you sacrifice your relationship or your time with your children because the mom is taking care of that. And so I just think in terms of leadership for up and coming companies, finding more balance around that. I mean, I think what we are learning is that people who have balance and have deep connections at home do better at work. And I think the same exists for men as well. And so the other advice I would, give women is make sure they do business with men who who have the same set of values around, I hesitate to say work-life balance, because at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur, and I expect a pretty high frequency
Yep.
when it comes to people working and trying to get a company going. And there's this expectation in entrepreneurship that you cannot have both a life and a high growth company. And I just fundamentally disagree with that. You can work those long hours and those hard days week in and week out and still have some balance in your life. And so I would really say surrounding yourself not just with support, the things you can't do, but surrounding yourself with support for the things that you can do. And the same goes for men as well.
On the next episode, we're going to hear and learn about how Mellie accomplishes so much, both personally and professionally. So I'm going to really encourage you to tune into the next episode. And you're also going to hear a little bit about what I think is a fallacy, work-life balance. I want to highlight a couple things for you to think about from today's podcast. If you are a leader, and my guess is if you're listening to this and there's anybody that depends upon you in any form or fashion, you are in fact a leader, you probably feel like a pup, and that's okay. Most leaders feel like they do not have it all figured out. In fact, the ones that think that they have it all figured out are the ones you really watch out for. It's been my consistent experience, when there's pride, that automatically disqualifies you from being a good leader. It's also okay to have your leadership philosophy mature, to grow, to continue to learn from your life experiences and those around you. Take into consideration what Mellie said about the advice she gave to young women entering the workforce. Her opinion didn't erratically change, but it evolved with more information, with more experiences. That's a great piece of advice, both for men and for women. A lot of leadership is simply just personal accountability. Do what you say you're going to do. I love how Mellie made that very simple. Let's try not to make that complex. I'm going to encourage you, please do not miss the next episode where Mellie and I dive into how she really manages a busy life, both personally and professionally, and she gives some great advice to first-time founders. All that and more on the next episode of For You Leaders. So I've got a question for you. Do you love this podcast or do you hate it? Either way, I want to know. I want to get better and provide the information that you want and that's going to help you grow. If you would please leave a review on iTunes for this podcast, we're giving away some free copies of my best-selling book, Predictive Leadership, if you give us a review. Good or bad, just want it to be authentic. Just let me know you've left a review by emailing podcast@kirkdando.com, and we'll send you a copy of my book, Predictive Leadership. Thank you for listening.